Good morning, everyone. Oh, the power, it's so exciting. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Bevan, and I'll be your MC for today. It's such a delight and privilege to be with you all today. I'd like to start us off by inviting Uncle Michael West from the Metropolitan Aboriginal Land Council to the stage to welcome us to country. Uncle Michael will be familiar to many of you. I know he's very familiar to me, and he's a welcome sight around the area with his beautiful welcomes to country. Uncle Michael's from the Gomeroi Nation. He was born and raised in Sydney. He's a member of the Stolen Generations and brings an incredible depth and variety of experience to his conversations with us, including roles such as the co-chair of the National Sorry Day Committee, the director of the New South Wales Indigenous Chamber of Commerce, a delegate to the National Congress of Australians First Peoples, and he's part of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Advisory Board to the Board of Headspace. So we're so grateful to have you, Uncle Michael. It's lovely to see your familiar face, and thank you for bringing us to country.
I'd like to say Bujari Gamarua Gadiguliora, and what I was going to say, all the faces out there, I know you're doing the best in your community, and that's what it's about, isn't it? And when you think about it, you know, it's always a difficult year, every year, because we have so many DFE. I was just thinking about a second ago, and that almost every work there's a woman killed, isn't there? Yes. And this isn't right. This isn't how our society should be. Our society should be that whatever postcode you're born in, the gender you identify, the colour of your skin, the shape of your eyes, you should be able to fulfil your dreams and aspirations. You should be in a safe society. And we've got a long way to go yet. We've got a long way to go. And obviously here is the land of the Gadigal, one of the 29 clans, and out on that beautiful harbour there on a beautiful day like this, imagine being in a Ngawi, traditional canoe. More likely a woman would be in there. And if you've seen down at the Opera House the sculpture, that big white sculpture on the lawn there, yes? That is in the shape of a Gadigal woman's fishing hook made from a shell. It's called Bara, B-A-R-A. It's very important to understand. Culture is all around everywhere you go. And obviously if you're in that beautiful Ngawi and you're paddling across the other side, and what is the clan over there, the other side, the coat hanger? Camaragal. And imagine turning left, heading west inland, and then you go and you're looking down where Darling Harbour is. No doubt all of you have been to Darling Harbour and the ICC. Have you seen on the side of the door there what it is, traditional name down there? It's called Gamora. And imagine Barani swimming around with the little calves. Do you know what Barani are? You weren't expecting this much interaction, were you? Barani, think of what are large mammals? Whales, yes. Part of the totems here too. So Barani are whales. And they would be swimming with their little calves in there. And you're going along and you pass, obviously, Gamora, and then what is the next one on the left? And you no doubt you would have seen it many times, and you would have seen it last night. It starts with W. Wongor. And then you're looking on the right there as you're paddling along. It also starts with W. Wallamadigal. That's where Benelong is. Benelong, partner of a strong Camaragal woman called Barangaroo. And if you keep going, what do you eventually hit? What starts with B? Baramadigal. And Bara means eel, B-U-R-A. And there's a whole creation story about Sydney Harbour being created by a giant eel in the waterways, and that eel is now resting off of Balmain with its eye looking up into the sky. Do you know what that island is called? What fella's named after a little four-legged animal? Goat Island, yes. But its traditional name is Memel, M-E-M-E-L. It's so important to learn these things. Wherever you are around country, you should always learn what it's called. Also, it's important history and everything too. And I'll get you guys to get out your phones because I think it's important to look up a couple of things. Because we have been interacting with the world Aboriginal people for more than hundreds and years, and hundreds of years we've been interacting. We didn't sit around here singing Kumbaya. We did trade up the top with sea cucumbers. Has anybody seen a sea cucumber? Yes, they're quite big, aren't they? Yes. So that was traded up the top sea cucumbers with the Macassans, the Indonesians and China. We want to make this point last year with the 50th anniversary of a guy named Goff going over to China and starting relationships with them. And we made that point with the Chinese ambassador and all the consuls. And we traded up there for many years of production plants up there. And I was lucky last week to meet one of the descendants of the traders up there who traded with the Indonesians and the Macassans. A couple of aunties were down from up there. It was great having a yarn with them. But I'll get you guys on the 2 rows over there to have a look at Huntingbird Manuscript Vatican, Huntingbird Manuscript Vatican. And on these 2 rows here, I'll get you a look at Bray Warriner fish traps, Bray Warriner fish traps. Because in New South Wales, we are lucky to have this Bray Warriner fish traps here, but there are other fish traps around the country too. There are many sites around everywhere. Sydney's rich of sites too, not only middens, engravings, stone grooves, everything. And we need to protect them because as an Australian, whether you're born or whether you're nationalised, you should look after our culture and our sites because they need to be protected for the world. And we also want you to maintain your own culture and stay strong in that, your own identity. It's so important to understand where you come from. So what did you find for Bray Warriner fish traps? I am judging your Google skills against kids too. So they're stones arranged in a way that the fish are easy to catch and collect. It is a meeting place, yes. And how old is it? It's 40,000 years old, 40,000 plus years old. So these things are very important to protect. And then it's aquaculture and engineering when you think about it. So what did you find for the Huntingbird manuscript? You'll see a very familiar face in there. Yes, there's a cockatoo in there. And the cockatoo, so what century is that? 13th century. It's 13th century, 1241. So it's important to remember that reinforces our interaction with the world. And there was an article not too long ago with on one of the TV channels where the Aboriginal people migrated with the Macassan trade route into Indonesia and that. So it's important to remember these things. The cockatoo doesn't look too happy, do they? No. They do have an attitude, cockatoos, and I love watching them. They do cause a bit of chaos, and you see them squawking in groups and large flocks, and just all coming down and just having a big feed, and they make a lot of noise and they can be a bit destructive. But they are all part of us being connected to everything. So those cockatoos and also things like the ibis, and please don't call them bin chickens. No, that's disrespectful. Because think about this, the only reason, I was having a yarn with my mate yesterday, one of the other elders, that the only the reason they're dirty in that is because we haven't been caring for country, and now they've come to the city to live. So we need to remember that. We've been terrible in caring for country and looking after their environment that they live. So now they've had to migrate with other birds to the city, and that's why they're going through our bins. So it's our fault that they have to scavenge through the bins. So we need to remember that, and we need to care for country. It's also important to take a moment's silence to pay respects to country, but pay respects to all those who've gone before us, our ancestors. Pay respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tradition owners, elders and custodians of the past and present. And also to remember those who've lost the last few years through this pandemic. Because remember, they had their own aspirations, names, families and communities. And also it's important that we need to remember the victims of DFE too. And as I said, it's not acceptable, it's not right. A woman is dying every week from domestic violence, and we can create a better society. And I think for any anyone that says there's no problem, they're part of the problem, I think, too. It's so important. And we need to pay respects to those who have gone before us, as I said, and reflect our journey right here, right now, at this point in the continuum. So if we have a moment's silence and a moment of reflection, thank you. We have 3 beautiful waterways, which are the aquatic boundaries of the Eora Nation. What are those 3 rivers? H, G and N. Hawkesbury, Nepean and Georges. On behalf of Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, members and elders, welcome here. Continue the good work that you are doing in your communities. To our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters, we warmly welcome you from country, clan, tribe and nation. And to all our brothers and sisters, we all belong to that one big mob, don't we? Yes? It's called humanity. We warmly welcome you from your family, your community, your neighbourhood, ultimately the country you come from. And I think it's wonderful, the diversity in our country and in our world. And we need to treat people with respect and dignity. My parents always told me, treat people the way you want to be treated. I think if you go by that rule, it's pretty good. So on behalf of Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, welcome here, enjoy today, safe journey back to your family, your loved ones' community, and always was, and what is it? Aboriginal land never ceded. We've got conversations happening, but they need to be done with respect and treating people with dignity, and they need to be fact-based too, I think. I'll leave you with those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Uncle Michael, for a beautiful welcome. I've never not left a welcome from Uncle Michael West without feeling warmer and more connected to country, so I hope that you do too. I'd like to add my own acknowledgement of the Gadigal people and acknowledge elders past and present. It's always a privilege. Every single day I pretty much get to stand on Gadigal and Wongal land, and it feels like a privilege. And all of us can remember that we stand on that never ceded sovereign Aboriginal land. I'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal speakers, colleagues and friends today. I'm delighted that we have such a strong and group of Aboriginal people influencing our conversations today, and it's going to be a great morning, so I'm particularly excited there. And I can tell from the kind of conversations that I've heard this morning and the general buzz that we had today that how excited you are all to be here together in person. It still feels exciting. Maybe it's just me, but whoa. Loving it. I know that from the feedback that we've had, that FAMs have had, that you're looking forward to this kind of fantastic lineup that has been carefully curated by FAMs today to be thought-provoking, engaging, an opportunity for learning and conversation, and to have the kind of conversations that you want to have, that we need to have in this sector. And that will allow us to kind of build our connections with each other, our collaboration and our relationships. So I really am looking forward to an extraordinary day. For those of you who missed it, my name's Karen Bevan. I'm the MC for today. I'm a complete blow-in here to support Susan and the team and to just make your journey through this conference as seamless as possible. We're sold out. Just saying. Congratulations to the FAMS team, because getting a sold-out conference happening doesn't just occur. It happens when the sector is warmed up and ready to have these conversations. It happens when you make access possible and reach out and make things change. And FAMs have certainly done that. So as you can see from our slide, we have people from all over New South Wales. Every single DCJ district is represented here today, and I'd like to particularly call out a g'day to those who've travelled far and wide. You are very welcome, and it's a delight that you could make that time. And again, it speaks to the importance of our sector making time to connect and be together today. So before we go any further, I have some housekeeping details. So this is where I move into the flight attendant mode. You will please stay comfortable in your seats while I take you through. So first of all, we really wanted to say on behalf of FAMS that you are very welcome and everyone is welcome at this conference. We want everyone to feel okay to engage authentically in the conversation, and we want you to let us know if there's anything that helps us to better include you today. Whatever strategies you might need to feel relaxed, if you've got any suggestions or comments, please share them with us. And the team there will always be someone from the team at the registration desk if there's anything we can do to help you. Most importantly, the bathrooms are on the first floor, on this floor, opposite the lifts. And if you on the ground floor, they're at the rear of the building to the left of the hotel reception desk if things get crowded. There's also an accessible toilet on the ground floor, which is a gender-inclusive bathroom. And I'd like to just let us know that FAMS has made this conference a Hidden Disability Sunflower Showcase. And we recognise that some disabilities, conditions and chronic illnesses are not immediately obvious to others. The Hidden Disability Sunflower is a tool for people with non-visible disabilities to discreetly signal they may need extra time, support or understanding by wearing the symbol of the sunflower. FAMS staff and volunteers have been working with and trained by the team at Hidden Disability Sunflower, and you'll notice they're wearing the I Support the Sunflower pins and lanyards so they can be easily identified. If you have a hidden disability, please don't hesitate to ask one of the team if you need any additional support or any accommodations. And if you're interested in learning more about getting your organisation Sunflower trained, there's details in your conference program. You know, and I think that's such an important first step for us all to say that hidden disabilities are everywhere. They're you and me, they're the world, they're the children and families that we work with, and every step we make to make everything we do accessible, inclusive and welcoming makes such a difference to the experience of children and families. We do have, as part of that, a quiet room available if you need to catch a breath today. It's not for sneaky Teams meetings, just letting you know, but a chance to settle any sensory overload or grab a moment of calm. If you've, feeling that you're having some reactivity and you need a moment, we're supported by AbSec staff in the setup of the quiet room. The FAMS team can assist you to access this room, and you can find the quiet room on the lower ground floor in the executive boardroom. I checked it out. It's a fancy place. I invite you to use it if you would like to. But you can only access it via the lifts. So you'll go down to the lower ground floor and there's an executive boardroom there. Now, just quickly on the phones, we encourage you to use your social media platforms to communicate our conference, #FAMSConference23. If you feel so moved, we absolutely invite you to do so, but please put your phone on silent. We have regular breaks scheduled, so you'll have a chance to pick up on calls and emails throughout the day. On the evacuation front, should we need to be evacuated, which happened to me during the Barbie movie, and I can tell you that was very upsetting right at the denouement, so it does happen. Should you need to be evacuated, we will need to proceed via the staircases on the ground floor lobby area and leave via the main entry. The assembly point is on Ultimo Road, and Novotel staff will guide you on this. On the parking issue, if anyone is parking, to access the parking deal that is part of the conference, please make sure you validate your ticket at the hotel reception sometime during the day. Don't come to the FAMS registration, go downstairs to the hotel reception, but definitely do that before you return to your vehicle. Definitely do that before you return to your vehicle, okay? And just letting you know, we're filming our sessions today, all the plenary sessions, and these will be available online into the future. So if you have team members who couldn't make it, there will be that. We're also taking lots of photographs during the day, and if for any reason you don't want to be photographed, please let the team at reception know, and they'll use a discreet methodology for you to be able to not be photographed. It's all just secret business. and that happens a lot, and you should feel very comfortable to ask for that assistance. If you've got any questions or issues throughout the day, please visit the Friendly Fams team at the registration desk if you need anything. I'd like to just welcome you all very hard today, and more importantly, I know that Susan Watson, the CEO of FAMS, would like to officially welcome you and all of our distinguished guests to the conference. So please join us, Susan.
Our data shows us that in New South Wales, there are over 15,000 children and young people in out-of-home care. 43% of those are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander children. We cannot allow this to continue. Our sector is charged with the responsibility of reducing those terrible numbers. Who in this room finds that overwhelming sometimes? I know I do. At FAMS, we've heard about feedback from you all on the unprecedented challenges our sector is facing at this time. Staff recruitment, people leaving the sector in greater numbers than ever before, combined with ongoing funding issues and uncertainty. As the fearless and unapologetic leader of FAMS, I bring to you over 25 years of working in senior roles in government and the not-for-profit sector. Interestingly, my first job when I came to Australia, as you can tell I'm not born here, was as Director of Health Promotion at Manly Hospital in the early 90s. I feel I've come full circle. I'm now back again, advocating hard for more resources in early intervention and talking about upstream thinking. I love my job. My passion has been reignited by the incredible people I have met in this sector and the amazing work that you do. This is a day that has been set aside to create space to reflect on our work with our clients within our busy lives. It's a day to find some new information and resources, and it's a day to network with like-minded people, and it's also a day to have some fun. Some of you may be concerned that often what happens at a conference is you'll be asked to do more work when you're at breaking point already. As we know, the NGO sector is constantly asked to do more with less and to make impact with minimal resources. Today, however, is about providing you with support. All presenters have been briefed to provide tips, skills, and resources to enhance your work with your clients and not to add burden. In case you haven't noticed, I am so excited about today. I welcome you all on behalf of my amazing team and the FAMS board. Take on the challenge to find the most interesting piece of information or resource that you can take away with you and implement in your team. And I will be checking at the end of the day. Too many children are taken from their families and placed in out-of-home care. Today is about building on our skills and resources to keep children and families safe, strong, and supported. At FAMS, we continually advocate for our sector to also be safe, strong, and supported. And I know our minister and her team are really clear on our message. A safe, strong, and supported early intervention and prevention NGO sector is pivotal to reducing the number of children in out-of-home care and to address the overrepresentation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in the system. I hope you enjoy your day as much as we have just loved planning it for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. And having worked a bit with the FAMS team along the way, the passion for you individually, your services, and the children and families you serve is just been really clear in every decision, every thought that's been made about how this conference is designed. And I really, stand you, Susan, well done. And we're really fortunate today, and I think this says a lot about the importance of this sector, that I wanted to introduce and welcome the Honourable Kate Washington, the Minister for Family and Community Services and Disability Inclusion. Minister, thank you for backing up for a third day in this room. Minister Washington has had an incredibly important week and a difficult week working with Aboriginal out-of-home care services to develop the roadmap for care for Aboriginal children, and it's exciting and impressive that the Minister has made an enormous amount of time to connect deeply over the last 2 days and then to come and be with you today. And so we're very grateful, Minister. Thank you for coming. The Minister, as you know, has been in the job now for close to 6 months, probably feels a bit longer, and has been regularly connecting with our sector. So many of you will have heard her speak or had the opportunity to connect. But Minister Washington, prior to being elected to the seat of Port Stephens in 2015, was a lawyer, but since being elected, she has held many portfolios in the shadow ministry, including incredibly relevant ones such as early childhood education, rural health, environmental protection, and fortunately for us was the Family and Community Services and Disability Inclusion Shadow Minister. So that means the Minister brings relationships and insights from her work prior to government. That's a great outcome for us in that we have the very unusual opportunity of a Minister who's well briefed, understands our sector and has built relationships with all of us. So that has been an incredible opportunity for us. And I know that this is particularly important for this sector as we head towards recommissioning for targeted early intervention and family preservation services. I'm also aware, as many of you will be, that the Minister has been deeply engaged by the findings of the Australian Child Maltreatment Study and has genuinely been wrestling with all the complexity that this portfolio brings, and in particular, as a result of the findings of the study, the critical importance of the opportunities offered by the work that you all do in engaging with families earlier in the life cycle, earlier in concerns in families, earlier in children's lives. We know how much of a difference that makes, and I've heard the Minister speak very passionately about the importance of thinking about that and working with that complexity. So we are so very fortunate and very grateful to have you, Minister, and please join me in welcoming Minister Kate Washington to FAMS 23.
Well, good morning, everyone. I don't think I need to say anything else. Karen's just said it all for me, so I just maybe I can just take questions from the floor. No. I do say that in jest. Can I too acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we meet and pay my respect to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And thank you, Uncle Michael, for your warm and generous welcome, as always, to your country. It's as Karen said, it just always leaves you feeling more connected, and just even that moment we all take to think and to consider country and the people who've gone before. It's always grounding, and I personally find it really helpful. Wish we could do it every day. And I also want to extend my respect to all elders, and past, present, and particularly to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us here today. Now, I've had the privilege of attending FAMS functions in the past, prior to the recent change of government. I'm going to say it wasn't 6 months ago, surely. But it's indeed now an immense pleasure to be opening your conference as the Minister for Families and Communities and the Minister for Disability Inclusion. I have enormous respect for FAMS. I have enormous respect for the members of FAMS. I have enormous respect for the work that you all do, because we know that the work that is being done by you who are in this room and others who aren't here, but are in this early intervention and prevention space, you are doing the most impactful work that needs to be done in the sector. Now, I know it's going to make her uncomfortable for a moment, but I'm going to put a spotlight on Susan Watson for her tireless advocacy for the sector. In fact, I've decided that there are several Susans, because I know I'm busy and I swear I see Susan everywhere. Relationships are really critical to all of us in all of our roles, but especially when you're leading a peak organisation in a sector that many people don't understand. And honestly, I see Susan everywhere, educating everyone about the importance of the work that you do. And because of the relationships Susan has been building and the deep connection she has across the entire sector, the issues you'll be discussing today are tapping into the tricky issues that we are all talking about in this sector daily. So it's the perfect place for you to be sitting in today, courtesy of the connections that Susan and the FAMS team have been making. So I thank the entire FAMS team and the board led by Ashley for making this space today and putting this critical spotlight on issues that we are all tackling daily. And in fact, as Karen has already said, I've been in this room for the past 2 days, literally, having invited almost 100 Aboriginal leaders and stakeholders from the child protection sector to discuss how we fix the system that's producing such poor outcomes and the outcomes that Susan spoke about, but particularly for Aboriginal children and families. The ongoing overrepresentation of Aboriginal children in the child protection system is horrifying, and it just cannot continue. And when I was sworn in as minister, I gained parental responsibility for more than 13,000 vulnerable children. That's far too many. Of those, 6,500 are Aboriginal children. Again, far too many. And there are more than 15,000 vulnerable children in out-of-home care right now. So, that's why I convened the forum. And I asked everyone who attended the forum to do what you're doing today, to reimagine the child protection system. And they did. So some of the conversations were difficult for everyone in the room, as it may be for you today as well, but it's so important to have them. There is a legacy of hurt and trauma carried daily by families who've lost children from one generation to the next, to the next. The compounding impacts of generational child removals is difficult to understand, let alone give voice to. So when those in the sector have the strength to say what they've been saying for years and what they've been seeing for years, what they've personally been experiencing for years, we all have a responsibility to listen and to genuinely hear. And here's the fundamental message that I heard. They want to see the system redesigned, so it's about supporting families, not about removing children. It's pretty simple. It's a simple statement, seems really obvious, but you're all now sitting in a system that has and is spiralling away from that very simple concept. A system that's trying to continually manage crisis instead of giving families the support they need when they need it to stay together. In the past 2 days, we started a powerful partnership with Aboriginal leaders, which will drive the much-needed reform and redesign of the system that we are committed to delivering. I'll be working hard to make the partnership work, because we'll only change outcomes for Aboriginal children and families if Aboriginal organisations and their communities have a say in what happens to their own children. And we need to change the system which sees funding flow to the system which currently sees funding flow to the crises, yet trickle to where it's needed most in early intervention and family preservation. How we get there, though, isn't simple. The biggest challenge we face is the fiscal mess that we have inherited as a new government. When we came in, we saw We lifted the lid, and I've got to say we were quite surprised. Surprised is one word, shocked is another. Because fundamentally right now what I'm having to find is $250 million to prop up the system as it currently is, to ensure that vulnerable children aren't left on the street. It's to allow the system to operate as is what I need to find to keep it going. The biggest contributor to the fiscal mess is the obscene amount of money being spent on putting kids in hotels and motels with 24/7 shift workers. We simply don't have enough foster carers, emergency carers or other residential options, so the department and the taxpayer are paying a massive price. But we all know it's the children who are paying the biggest price. Unsurprisingly, getting kids out of hotels and motels is a priority action out of this week's conference. But solutions aren't simple, again, otherwise they would have been done already. And I know that this isn't the end of the system that you work in, but the reality is this: it's having an impact on you, because I have to stem the flow of funds to the crisis end so I can get more to you. I'm determined to do it, and until I can, I'm determined to do better with the significant resources that we have and do better with them. But your conference and this morning's call to reimagine the sector goes to show that right now there is a critical alignment right across the sector, from peaks to providers, from the department to NGOs, even to the courts. There's a shared purpose and focus to improve outcomes for all children, and especially Aboriginal children. It's not only across the child protection sector either that there's an alignment. There's an alignment from my government with the federal government. We share values, we share purpose, and we actually enjoy working with each other. And also within my own government, across ministerial portfolios, across my ministerial colleagues and their agencies. We all, refreshingly, we all get along. We like working together, and we are determined to work together to tackle the drivers of disadvantage, because we all know that the families that you with and what they experience in terms of well-being and health isn't just a child protection issue. It's a housing issue, it's a health issue, education, it's the lot. So my colleagues are well aware that we all have to work together to make the biggest difference. And I'll tell you what, we haven't been sitting in opposition for 8 years without getting terribly impatient to do it. Anyway, so my message to you this morning is to hold on to hope, because right now we have an opportunity that we must seize. I'm hoping to harness this opportunity with you and alongside you, because government cannot do it alone. This is about a whole of government effort, and a whole of sector effort, and a whole of community effort to make the change that we know must happen. And as you all know, the key to driving change lies in the work that you do to keep children safe at home with a safe and loving family. Despite the efforts of many in the sector in the past, recommendations that have been ignored and successive reforms, they've failed. Now the child protection system is well and truly broken and needs a whole lot of love to turn it around. There's a lot of love in this room today. I can feel it, and I know that you are all wanting to see that happen. Some of the solutions were in this room over the past 2 days, and more solutions are here today, because everyone knows that effective early intervention is key. We need to turn the child protection system on its head, where more resources are spent supporting families, building resilient communities, instead of catching kids poorly when a crisis hits. How we get there is the challenge before all of us. I thank you for the important work that you do and for taking the time to be in this space today. I look forward to hearing outcomes from your conversations, and I'm excited to walk with you on a path of reform. Now, whilst the result last night wasn't what we'd all hoped, we still need to channel the Matilda's energy, seize the opportunity we have, and reimagine and reform the sector for the sake of our children and our future. I know that you've got a stellar lineup with your conference to come, so take every opportunity you've got to have the important and difficult conversations that you need to have, and enjoy your conference. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Minister. It's pretty exciting to hear a minister set out an agenda like that, and to acknowledge that it's a process, but the outcome is where we all share a passion to make sure that we invest where we can actually make a real difference for children earlier, so that we make a difference lifelong for those entire families. And I saw the minister here yesterday and all of the Aboriginal leaders who were here yesterday in this room, the intensity in the room, I came to have a little sneak peek of the venue, and the intensity in the room was palpable. People worked so hard, so it will be wonderful to see the fruit of that labour. And I know that the hard-working people in this room will be very buoyed by your passion and how much you care about this portfolio. It matters a lot that we have someone in the portfolio who's really behind this work. So you're welcomed, you're warmed up. We're going to take a moment now, based on feedback from the sector. You know, what we heard was that people didn't want a conference where you were just constantly overwhelmed, and that you wanted to take some time to mindfully engage, because as the Minister has shown us, there's a lot to mindfully engage with, and we need to always be sort of creating that space between the action and our response. And we wanted to take a moment this morning for that. So we've got a packed schedule coming up, and to get you ready to kind of manage that well throughout the day, we've made some time for us to stop and breathe and set a bit of an intention for the day. So to help us do that, I'd like to invite Mary Jo McVeigh to help us land comfortably in the room together. Many of you will know Mary Jo, she's a long-term contributor to our sector. She's the founder and CEO of Cara House and is an experienced practitioner of trauma-informed work. We're so delighted to welcome Mary Jo to settle us in for the day with open hearts and open minds. Welcome, Mary Jo.
So you put the sensible photograph up. Where's Lisa? I give her the choice of another one when I won my award, and I think it was a bit more kind of, the touristy version of it. Wow, the space I am standing in. Following those two women and Uncle. What a sacred space for me to stand into. And may I respond to your welcome and acknowledgement to land. I'm a visitor to your vast and beautiful ancient land. Arrived in 1991 for a year, so don't invite me to your house for a cup of tea. I might never leave. And I've been obviously present to lots of welcomes and acknowledgement. And every time, it still moves me to tears. I've been a social worker for 40 years. It's the longest love affair I've ever had. And I love it. However, I must also stand in the reality of the part that my profession played in the stolen generation. And may I say in my native tongue, Ta bron urm, ta bron urm, ta more bron urm, I am sorry, I am sorry, I am deeply, deeply sorry. And I also would like to add, I've come from the land of the Wongal people, the people of the West, and the beautiful home bush basin where I walk along the river to get the spirit strong again. And I've travelled down to you here today and to recognise the ancient sacred land, and to all the leaders, past, present, and one day who will lead this nation forward. So gur mai agad for your acknowledgement. To Susan, well, tireless, tireless worker, and to the Green Goddess who stood in front of me. I thought that was a good sign. Honourable Minister wearing a green dress, not bad for an Irish woman to follow, eh? Not bad, so no matter what I say, hopefully it's going to go right. to thank the organisation committee, because I really do think people risk a lot inviting me to speak. Because even though I prepare something, those of you who know me, the mouth tends to open and sometimes the brain doesn't engage. And to Lisa, to organise me must be like trying to rein in wild Irish dragons. And she got me here, though it did take me half an hour to circumvent the area because I kept going to the wrong hotel. Anyway. The wonderful song of Andra Day starts with, I won't sing because that's another myth. We Irish, not all Irish can sing, I can't sing. But if I could, the song starts with, we're broken down and tired and can't find the fighter. I think of everything that everybody in this room does. I'm thinking of the last couple of years of bushfires and floods and COVIDs. I'm thinking of the things that you're going through internal to your organisation, as I said, the staffing capacities and why people are leaving this wonderful profession, about funding and resources. I think about all of that, and I'm not surprised that some of us are broken down and tired and cannot find that fighter inside. And that's just within the industry. We're also living and working currently in Australia, while the Albanese government has promised to inject huge amounts of cash into housing. We're currently in a situation with the lack of affordable public housing for decades. Means there's a shortage of good housing for our families, as unscrupulous realtors profiteer from increasing rents. This is also what you're working in. These are Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like our shelter, our physical health, our safety. And we do know, our Minister Butler admits that Medicare is in the worst shape it's been in 40 years' history. We know of family incomes currently. Associate Professor Ben Phillips from the ANU Centre for Social Research warns that many working people and working families simply will not have enough money to make ends meet this week. This week, not in our imaginations, in this week. Dr. Bradford from the University of New South Wales report shows that the dual, if you're in a dual family income, is well below the income that we would say is a minimum standard for a healthy lifestyle. This is the society that you're working in. And then we come to our children. Now, folks, those of you who know me know I love to laugh a lot, and I also unashamedly cry a lot. This is it. I've tried to be more professional, but this is it, and here we go. Despite 40 years of working in child protection and trauma, this report still brought me to tears and incredible foul language, apparently, at my dining room table, according to my sons. Not that I would swear in front of my children, but anyway, because I had to read a report and read that child maltreatment is endemic in Australia. Across our population, the Australian Child Maltreatment Report found a prevalence of neglect, 8.9%, physical abuse, 32%, sexual abuse, 28.5%, emotional abuse, 30.9%, and exposure to domestic violence, 39.6%. And so when a young psychologist said to me one day, "When are you going to stop crying, Mary Jo?" I said, "Never. I'm never going to stop crying." Thank you, sister. Those statistics, never. The report also showed that young people aged 16 to 24 report even higher rates of emotional abuse and exposure to domestic and family violence. And as you said, Uncle, not acceptable. Not acceptable. Maltreatment is not an historical problem. It is current in our nation today, and we know our First Nation children are represented higher than anybody else. There was also a joint report by Griffith University and Berry Street, that looked at suicide. Suicide counts for 38% of the death of young people. aged 15 to 24. This research echoes the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare in 2022 that stated suicide is the leading cause of many young Australians, with disproportionately high rates among our First Nation children, our young people with diverse gender and sexual identities, and our children experience domestic and family violence. So, what are we saying to our children? The rates of physical, sexual, emotional abuse, domestic and family violence are telling them they're less than worthy. And suicide rates are telling us they're getting the message. And yet, despite being broken down and tired, I'm in the room with my clan. I'm very, very far from my clan, my ancestral clan, but I'm in the room with my professional clan. And you don't wait around for funding to kick in. Oh, well, we're waiting, but you don't wait around. I know somebody in this room. For governments to move to social justice policy making, not party policy making. For an adult society to see children at a higher moral status deserving of more than our ageism, our sexism, our racism, our homophobic attitudes and violence. You're not waiting. You still go into work every single day. You rise up, in Day's words, despite the ache. It is the ache I see and I love. Minister talked about love. It is the ache that makes us who we are. Have you ever been in a building that's been on fire? I have a few times. Don't ask me why, but anyway. And I don't cause the fires, though I do shut down electrical equipment, but I don't cause the fires. I run out of buildings. Fires run into buildings. I have watched fires run into flames and smoke and toxic fumes on behalf of society. They do that for us. You in this room run towards toxic fumes every single day on behalf of society. That's what I love and honour. It is the rising up I also see and honour, because it's the rising up that makes you more than you could ever dream to be. Viktor Frankl wrote, out of the depths of his own suffering, he wrote, everything can be taken from a person, but one last thing, the last of all human freedoms, to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. It is this political freedom, which cannot be taken away, that makes life meaningful and purposeful. And I stand in front of you, a Belfast woman, knowing that sometimes that's all there was. Your life, wow, your work is meaningful and purposeful. You don't make the guns and the bombs that kill. And that's where I have hope. And again, the minister talked about hope. Might seem strange, me talking about all those statistics and standing in front of you crying to talk about hope, but I do. I have a fabulous relationship of hope. But it's not a naive, feeble hope. I don't do nice, by the way. That's the other thing. Those of you who don't know me, I don't do feeble, I don't do naive, and sure as hell don't do nice. Maybe it's one day. It is a realistic and a fiery hope. And I turn to my Celtic ancestry for the definition of the word hope. In Irish, there's two words. It's dochas or do. And dochas or do comes from the derivative of another word, which means belonging. Ah, yes. Thank you, ancestors. Thank you. For me, hope is in this room. It lies with each of you, because we belong to each other and with each other. And we belong to and with our families. What is this professional clan dichotomy? Don't get it, but anyway, maybe one day I'll get it. Until then, what we know, there's far more power in the action of hope, in giving to others and to belong to each other, than there is into giving into the isolation of despair. Now, Sister Despair's knocked on my door a few times, folks. You know, you don't get to your 60s without despair having a knock on the door, but you know. More energy, in connecting and belonging, because we know hopeless professionals can neither protect children, effect change, or provide the opportunities for the grace of healing to occur. You open the door to the grace of healing every single day in families' lives. So instead, let us turn to hope. Let us turn to Dochas as an act of giving to others and belonging. And in this belonging to each other, you're not alone. And now I'm going to introduce you to the 3 E's. You know, you're told you're not to eat anything with E's in it. Well, here you go. I want you to have a diet of E's. And your 3 E's are your epistemology, your ethics, and everyone and everything around you. So I want you to write down on whatever you want to under those 3 headings: your epistemology, your ethics, and everyone and everything around you. Now, epistemology is a big word. It's theory. It's how we think, right? We gather stuff together. So it's the thinking stuff. It's the theory stuff. The wonderful African-American activist, feminist, Bell Hooks, wherever she is now, wrote, "I came to theory because I was hurting. The pain within me was so intense I could not go on living. I came to theory desperate, wanting to comprehend, to grasp what was happening around me and within me. Most importantly, I wanted to make the hurt go away. I saw in theory then a location for healing." We practitioners must not feel excluded from the world of theory. I thought it was a good idea in my late 50s to start a PhD. What, 5 minutes left? You're joking me, right? Oh, no, speed up. Anyway, it's never too late to learn theory. we must see our places. No, I won't go that fast. We must, as practitioners, see that we are the theorists of the mud and the clay and the dust, right? We're doing it every day. But Bell writes, theory will only fulfill this healing function if we ask it to do so and direct our theorizing towards this end. So think about yourself. Think about what particular theories or thinking that you honor and how you would like it to serve the families that you work with. 2nd E, ethics. Oh, one of my favorites. Apparently I'm a weirdo. I love the ethics part of my PhD. I'm in love with the ethics committee. It's probably immoral, so I'll just quickly move on. There is no ethical framework, I have learnt, which will give us all the answers. That will take the pain away or will help with the uncertainty. Frankl again wrote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. But there must be a place, I think, for you to go to be able to change yourself. And I'm a bit of a gardener, so of course mine's a garden. And of course, when we think of the ethics as a garden, it has to be tended. You've got to till that soil and pull out the weeds, though I have had conversations with gardeners who's somebody's flower, somebody else's weed, but anyway. And really nurture it. Now, to cultivate an ethical life, I'm going to take a little different path. I'm not going to invite you to go to level 6 at Sydney Uni and read the dusty books. I'm going to invite you to enter into your heart and think about every time you have a feeling. Your emotions, emotions, are ethics in action. If you didn't feel the sadness, the ethical rage, it means you don't care. It's not vicarious trauma. It's not burnout. It means you can't cope with the work, Ms. McVeigh, because you're crying, or whatever is the polite version. Because the camera's on me, so I can't swear. Your emotions, have I sworn yet? So you pull me up. Your emotions are your ethics in action. So turn towards sister and brother despair and say, what are you telling me? What do you need me to know? Turn towards sister and brother sadness and say, what is that telling me about me as a professional? Because when you feel these things, that means you're in the game, which means you're making a difference. Those are the type of ethics you want to embrace. And my final E is everyone and everything around you. The wonderful First Nations American writer Sandy Gandhi talked about survivance. Survivance about the endurance of his people. not just their survival as a result of colonisation, but their continuing and enduring growth and fight for freedom, recognition and sovereignty. Endurance, going beyond survival. And so, when André sang, "You're broken down and tired, and you can't find the fighter," I again turned towards my Celtic ancestry. And before invasion, we had a spiritual ancestry called the Tuatha Dé Danann. And one of the treasures, we had 4 particular treasures, one of the treasures was the Cleave Solace, the flaming sword, sometimes known as the Dús Candle, the glowing bright torch. So pick up your flaming sword and your glowing bright torch to find everyone and everything around you that enlivens you, your people, your places, your animal brothers and sisters, your tree brothers and sisters, your mud, your clay, your dust brothers and sisters, this beautiful bounty of the earth and people that we've been given. And I now realised I'm the lover of 2 plants, tall poppies and sunflowers. Everybody be a tall poppy. They're quite beautiful when they're dancing in the warm European wind. So I invite you to think about your endurance in this work and notice what fuels your endurance. Notice the people, the everyone and everything around you. And so I would like to end on another Celtic tradition, and the tradition of Beannach. And Beannach recognises the sacredness of life, of everything in life, from the pebble to the great mountain, from the baby to the elder. And recognising the sacredness of all life, the Beannach blesses the hands and the hearts and the spirit of all who do the work. And so, Maciara, Beannach. May you gather close around you everyone and everything that you love, and may they send their love flowing back. May you celebrate everyone and everything around you that brings you joy, and may they party with you in these celebrations. May you honour everyone and everything around you that feeds your soul and lightens your heart, and may they honour you in return. May you deeply cherish everyone and everything around you that stayed faithful to you through the dark times on into the light. And may you continue to hold together the glowing bright torch. And above all, may you rise up in spite of the ache. May you rise up 1,000 times again. And may you rise up knowing you have each other. Guramila Mayagat, Guramila Mayagat. Thank you.
Speechless. Thank you, Mary Jo. Thank you. It's not a good quality in an MC, speechlessness. I think Mary Jo has connected us together, and I hope you feel as present and passionate, hopeful and energised as I do. And I think this is the perfect time for us to welcome a truly distinguished speaker who has come to us from Victoria, and I think is survivance personified and so much more. I'd like to introduce Adjunct Professor Muriel Bamblett, Chair of SNAICC and CEO of Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Agency. Auntie Muriel Bamblett is a Yorta Yorta and Dja Dja Wurrung woman who's led VACA since 1999, and she's one of Australia's leading experts on Aboriginal child welfare. She's a woman whose career has made significant impacts in Victoria and in the national space. We are very fortunate to have her bring her experience, her expertise and her wide perspective as chair of SNAICC. Auntie Muriel has been responsible for driving some major changes in the Victorian state child and family welfare system and has influenced the broader national conversation. She's an adjunct professor to the School of Social Work and Social Policy at La Trobe University, among so many other things. I didn't read the list. And really today, Auntie Muriel brings not only her own deep, wide and extraordinary experience, but also the experience that SNAICC has been having consulting and engaging with services around the country. And really hearing, SNAICC is the national voice of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in our country, and they've been deeply listening and connecting across the country. And we're really delighted to welcome you, Auntie Muriel, to start our conversation, and the conversation that the Minister and Mary Jo have made so clear we need to have about how we reimagine our sector alongside and in the interests of Aboriginal children, families and communities. Welcome, Auntie Muriel, and thank you.
Wow, it's always different when you sit in the front row and then all of a sudden you stand in front of everybody. Hi. Hi everybody, my name is, as I said, Muriel Bamblett. I'm a Yorta Jajarang Tangarong Bunurong woman, but my grandfather was born in Peak Hills, so he's Wiradjuri as well, and so my grandmother grew up in Narandra on the sandhills there, so I have a warm and wonderful connection. I'm sorry I didn't get the email about green today, and I'm so... but you know where my heart works. Can I begin, obviously, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands and obviously Uncle Michael West, and talking about the importance of language and connecting us to the land was just so significant for me. I want to acknowledge the beautiful land, the Gadigal lands, the Eora Nation. I'm really excited to be here today. I want to acknowledge the Minister. 6 months in, I think you've got a big challenge on your hand, but I think a really critical portfolio. I'm chair of SNAICC, and an apology from Catherine Little. She did want to be here. But as you would probably gather, we've got a massive agenda across this nation, and so Catherine has been travelling everywhere. Can I acknowledge and thank all the dignitaries in the room for really warmly welcoming her. I think I met them in the room and I said, my face is hurting from smiling at because everybody kept coming up and giving me such a warm smile, so thank you for the welcome. I am excited to be standing with you today and to be part of this opportunity to share our knowledge. I know I'll get a 5-minute warning, so I will always add, so I need to move on. I do want to really sort of acknowledge other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the room. I want to acknowledge, obviously, the work that you all do. I also want to acknowledge the dedication of Aboriginal leaders here in New South Wales, especially John Leha, the CEO of AbSec, who's going to be joining me later on a panel. I do want to thank FAMS for inviting me to speak, and particularly for your strong leadership in this space. I have many fond memories of New South Wales, particularly in the early days of working with SNAICC. So I've been with VACA now 24 years next month. I didn't think I would ever stay that long in child welfare, but it's my passion and it's who I love. I have many memories of Redfern, Aboriginal Children's Services, of Peter Haroa, of long-term board members in Gary Matthews, and so I think I can talk of many Aboriginal people that have contributed. Minister, you talked about being in a room with hundreds of people. I remember the times where we had a handful of Aboriginal people sitting in the room talking about Aboriginal issues, and so to have hundreds, you are truly, truly lucky. I've got the remote, so I'm going to... No, is that it? Just press the green. How's that? Yep. So that isn't a mistake, and I know that it's reimagining, but I think we need to re-image the system. I think we need to look different, sound different, and be different. So it is actually a mistake, but I can tell you that. I really wanted today to go a little bit through SNAICC, SNAICC was established over 40 years ago in recognition of the need to celebrate what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people bring to the space, to Aboriginal communities, to families, to culture. The centre of all our work is the right, obviously, of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children to grow up healthy, strong and connected to culture, country and community. SNAICC's work is to work with governments to help them understand the impact and value of the Aboriginal community-controlled sector and the resilience and strengths of Aboriginal families, and make sure that our voices are front and centre in decisions that impact on us. The title of this keynote is Reimagining Our Sector, and today I really want to spark the big picture thinking amongst all of you. I want you to re-image or reimagine our system. We are talking about big transformation, and I think the Minister talked about a reform agenda and her appetite for that. We don't want to tinker at the margins anymore. And you don't have to look far to see that. In South Australia, SNAICC is working with the government to establish their Aboriginal peak agency. In Western Australia, we're seeing change where governments are transferring services to Aboriginal communities. In the Northern Territory, you have commitments to establish a peak, now an Aboriginal sector voice and an Aboriginal child welfare agency. They don't have an ACCA or an ACCA that delivers child welfare in the Northern Territory. In Queensland, they are well underway with guardianship, with significant investments in family-led decision-making. Here in New South Wales, you have a commitment to transfer decision-making to Aboriginal hands and move to more outcomes funding. In Victoria, we have guardianship, and the Premier made us a commitment and then backed it up with a budget of $140 million for a reform agenda. These are exciting times with great engagement through Close the Gap, Safe and Supported, investment in sector strengthening, workforce funding, funding for a centre to build an evidence base of what works in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. So I say to you today, it's not enough to say we'll fix the child welfare system. We do need to reimagine it. But what image do we want to have? The strength of SNAICC's work comes from our community connections, building on cultural strengths and knowledge that our community-controlled sector applies in practice every day. But mainstream often fail to see it, fail to recognise the value of it. It is important to highlight that community-controlled organisations are more than just service providers. They are expressions of our self-determination, of our right to be Aboriginal people living on our land. However, with the significant reform agenda through, at the moment, the Commonwealth's Closed the Gap and Safe and Supported, the community-controlled sector will need to grow substantially, the biggest challenge we have, to be ready to take on additional work that delegating statutory decision-making authority will bring. Greater responsibility comes with greater obligations. With the highest numbers of Aboriginal people in New South Wales, I believe it is time for you to sit down and seriously look at the barriers to be able to progress commitments and work in ways to overcome them. But not get stuck by the barriers. Keep fighting, keep lobbying. I'm looking at John while I'm talking to him. It took VACA 10 years, really. We had legislation in 2005. Then we got stuck with the legislation. So it wasn't until 2017 that I actually took on guardianship of the first child. The next ACCO after us to follow was 5 years on. Then the one after that, 2 to 3 years. We have 16 ACCOs that are looking towards guardianship. So we are working hard. It is hard work. I just urge you to maintain the pace. Every step as Aboriginal people that one of us make is a step for all of us. Each step makes it easy for us all to replicate, scale up, innovate, evaluate and adapt. At a national level, SNAICC will be looking at reform opportunities like funding, policy and legislation and system elements that need to be brought together to make these transitions work for around the country. This is going to be a real opportunity for an open conversation to have a real voice about what we need to make the system transformation work, what Aboriginal models we need, the infrastructure, workforce, the policy settings to make our aspirations possible. But we cannot leave children behind. our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children need to know who they are. They need to know who their kin are. We need to make sure they know who their genealogy is, that they have a family history, that they have a connection to land, that they have a return to country. Those things are important to our children. I think that we also remember that Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people have been reluctant to be in this space for so long because child protection has always been a terrible word to Aboriginal people. It always conjures up images of taking away children. So we have to overcome those traumas, those histories, those fears that child protection have evoked. And that means that we're reimagined and restoring. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about language and how do we do that in a minute. As I said, the path forward to achieve system reform has been set at the national level through Safe and Supported, the National Framework for Protecting Australia's Children. It is the key national framework to achieve the closing gap target to reduce the overrepresentation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in out-of-home care by 45% by 2031. Minister, I just want to really sort of allude to the fact that when we started to negotiate the close the gap targets, New South Wales was the most strongest in the room that they couldn't do it. Felt that it was too big a challenge and that they couldn't commit to it. So the language has changed, but I think it is a real challenge for New South Wales, given those numbers. Under this framework, specific action plans have been launched in January this year, particularly by SNAICC, and through all of those reforms, to outline a reform pathway for state and territory governments who are sitting around the table with us at SNAICC and the ACO sector to be able to work out how do we do this. A key action from these plans is obviously to the transfer of legislative authority in child protection to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community and organisations across the country, including the transfer of legislative authority. I know this kind of national commitment and coordination under Safe and Supported will absolutely make a big difference. We are seeing this in Victoria. The reunification rate for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in Victoria, the rate for the department is 12% reunification rate. Already, our reunification rate in Aboriginal is 23%. So more and more children are going home and staying home. And these are children on long-term orders. You know, when you do a reunification for a child on a long-term order, you all do a high five. So to see that many children going home and staying home is really critical. I know this kind of national commitment and coordination under Safe and Supported will make a big difference. This is because it includes shared decision-making at the highest level between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leadership and governance. It is at the heart of the reform process. New South Wales was the first state to commit to transfer services back to Aboriginal community control, with Victoria following with our work on Beyond Good Intentions. An example of successful partnerships is SNAICC's work with Life Without Barriers. Life Without Barriers has committed to transfer all out-of-home care services to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children within the next 10 years. They are now moving from the provision of care to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and instead advocating for the support and investment of resources into ACOs. This partnership shows the vision, courage and commitment that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and organisations have, a commitment to that and the solutions and expertise. We know what works for our children. We hope this helps to set a precedent for future service delivery. Achieving this commitment is going to involve active and deliberate action from the non-government sector to be able to do it, and this is what we've seen in Victoria. I do want to spend a couple of minutes sort of talking to you today about Aboriginal models because SNAICC just gave me a list of notes to sort of, and I thought, nah, I can't help it. We have this lovely competition between New South Wales and Victoria, and now it's Queensland that are sort of running ahead of us. So if you have a competition minister, we're happy to keep putting you and the Premier in the room and all the minister, our beautiful minister in Victoria. So competition between governments is good for really for outcomes. I really want to reiterate, I've been at VACA, for 24 years, but it's not me. It's the people that come to work with us, that work in partnership, have many staff that have got years of experience in working with child protection, that have a commitment to this work and have worked with us. So this looks very busy. Now, my teams tell me that the Aboriginal Family Preservation and Reunification Response, and this is an operating model that it's just a fancier way of explaining the different teams, agencies, relationships that must exist for the response service to be able to be delivered. Now, I know that you've been talking about this, John, the last couple of days about a family preservation and reunification. When the government first brought this to us, it had nothing Aboriginal in it. It was just a schema that was filled about how do you do it. What we wanted to really, and we argued very strongly for to have an Aboriginal presence in it and to be able to input what that model looked like. There was a lot of opposition. A lot of people didn't believe we had the expertise or that we could do it. And that's what I want to put in the room. There has to be a view that you can do and will do, and that we can build a system that listens to Aboriginal. It is essentially the who in the response. You can see the who numbered on the right. The strength of this response, and I know this is usually a 2-hour session, so I'm going to give you, in the next 10 minutes that I've probably got, a really sort of just high-level view of some of the things that we're doing. The strength of this response, while it was designed to be quite rigid by government in how it operates in terms of hours, targets, etc., is the ability to scale up and down the intensity of the supports provided to families in need. There is no one solution. It is truly a tailored individual response. So I've got the next slide. This slide shows you a bit more clearly what happens, and this really shows how language matters in your practice and framing for Aboriginal people. I think some of the language, and I'll go through a little bit more, but you think about the language of child protection and investigation. How harsh is that word? We're going to do and the protective application and a notification and all of those language. So language you will hear from me today is very much about, and we can't change the language of, obviously, government. How many? I've got 5 minutes, so I better move very quickly. So this language reflects really connect instead of identification and referral and intake, understand instead of engagement, assessment and developing a safety plan, build safety and empower, these are the interventions, link up, referrals, create opportunities, education, employment, closure and transition. So this one here, it shows you as well, we use cultural therapeutic ways, and so Aboriginal ways of healing, protecting, connecting, and how do we plan for a child to map out their dream for the future in a safe, culturally safe and strong way that builds on their strength. This is our family summary maps, our warriors, barriers, strengths and future. This is the one I really wanted to sort of talk to you about. This is really the map or the model that we took to the Premier in Victoria, and our model has 6 levels, and here I hope too that you see the language difference we use to walk the journey together. Early help is not static, it's dynamic. It also doesn't mean early years, it means early help. Getting in earlier when the family needs it, regardless of age of the child. It recognises families are dynamic and so should support that they receive. So you can see a bit of Minister, I'll make sure you get a copy. You can see a little bit more of our model here. We call it the Community Protecting Burais, and it's a funding stream that lets us start investigations. So very shortly in September, I'll be taking on investigations for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. At the moment, we've got over 800 children in foster care, and I am the guardian for over 200 Aboriginal children in Victoria. When I had to sign off the passport application, I was a bit confused because I'm the parent now of a child, and when they travel overseas, I actually, but it really is exciting. The Protecting Community Bureaus is the funding stream that lets us start investigations, working in partnership with families earlier before removal needs to be an option. First, we got the legislative change to make this happen, and a new bill with the statement of recognition will guide our decision making. What I love about the approach that staff on the ground have developed with community is the big auntie energy. So taking it away, and I'm the big auntie in my case in Victoria, but it is about really sort of changing the way we think about about outcomes. But one of the things that I just want to talk in we've been developing an Aboriginal child protection diversion and looking at how do we put more funding. And what we've done is we've had a pilot, and what that pilot's demonstrated is that for every $1 invested, there's been a $5 saving for government. I know that appeals to everybody, particularly government and Treasury, and so when you have to be able to build an evidence base. So lastly, I just want to talk very quickly about learning and collaboration is needed to work effectively for our sector, and more importantly for children and families in our care. This means that organisations too, at VACA we aspire to community outcomes but also organisational outcomes so that we can work with our communities to meet and address their needs and expectations. Before we shift to the panel discussion, I do want to conclude with a call to action and an example of exciting work that SNAICC is leading. I want to call for an action. Those of you who are leaders in the child and family welfare sector to get behind us in the transformational shift. Very much that's what's driven us in Victoria, the government behind us, the sector behind us, and the belief that we can do it. So if I can leave you with one message to take away, it's a call to start envisioning and planning of what this will look like and be open to a different dialogue with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peak bodies and leaders in this state. Here in New South Wales, that is AbSec, the peak body for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, ably led obviously by John Leha, not just because you're looking at me there, John. This will be a long-term solution. Setting up Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community sector has been something that we've done really well, but we can only progress change through strong relationships, trust, and the belief that we can do it, not competition. This conference is a great opportunity to build collective understanding, and I really thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Auntie Muriel. I just think I'm taking away big auntie energy as an extraordinary way to talk about what it means to be cared for and protected as a child in care. If I can invite our panellists to come up over here on the left-hand side of the stage so that we don't have a scrum, to join us up here. So Auntie Muriel's really brought a lot of thinking and deep work that's happened in Victoria and the expertise of SNAICC nationally. And when we talk about Reimaging, it's as much about how do we recreate, relanguage our work as it is reimagine our parts in it. So together we've brought together a panel to explore how our sector can do that work best to respond to the needs of children and families, especially Aboriginal children families, in the way we design, procure, deliver and resource services. We've got a fabulous panel. You can find out all about them in your booklets. We've got Stephen Bray, just pop your hand up, Stephen, the Acting Director, Family Preservation and Child Protection in Child and Family Strategy, Policy and Commissioning at DCJ. Anthony Shannon, who is the Director of Early Intervention, Volunteering and Youth at DCJ. John Leha, the CEO of AbSec, the star of the last couple of days, I imagine, and a man who also backed up for day 3. And Susan Watson, the CEO of FAMS, and we're fortunate to also have Auntie Muriel with us for the panel. We're going to jump straight in, and I did say this, we're going to kick off with Anthony and Stephen. I said to them, thanks so much for joining our panel. So in recognition of your generosity and putting yourselves on the line in front of the entire sector, I thought I'd start with an easy question, which is, as architects of the system that support children and families experiencing vulnerabilities, and in some cases at risk of child protection intervention or being removed, what are you doing to address the critical issues to make sure that Aboriginal children and families are centred in the way services are designed, procured and provided? How are you going to make that difference? I think Anthony's going to kick us off. He drew the short straw.
Thanks. I'd also like to acknowledge country and pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to Aboriginal people here today. Look, I think in answering that question, I think really we, DCJ, need to deliver on our commitments to self-determination and genuine partnership with Aboriginal people. And to do that, I think we really need to continue some of the structural changes that we've got underway in the early intervention sector, and even go a bit further to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to deliver on those commitments. So some of the things I think, what that looks like, what that structural change looks like, I think delivering on our 30% investment target for Aboriginal community-controlled organisations in early intervention. We have been progressing towards that target slowly. We only have our existing budget to work with. We don't have any new funds, so that presents some challenges. But last financial year, there was $5 million flowed from mainstream organisations to Aboriginal community-controlled organisations. We are seeing some growth in the Aboriginal sector in early intervention. There's 54 ACOs now funded under our targeted early intervention program, and that's an increase of 19 from when the program started 3 years ago. We've got 9 new Aboriginal child and family centres being funded by government, which will come online in the next couple of years as well. So I think that is those policy settings hopefully will kind of moves towards those commitments. I think the Aboriginal-led commissioning that AbSec's undertaking together with DCJ, I think shows really great promise. I think ensuring that Aboriginal people are at the heart of designing, procuring and delivering services for the Aboriginal communities in which they work is really the future, and it's really where we should put a lot of effort. I think continuing to invest in the evidence base around what works in terms of Aboriginal designed and delivered early intervention services. I think that is critically important. There is some work we're doing around an Aboriginal scan of evidence that's looking at exactly that, and we want to make sure that we are investing more in the evidence base around what works for Aboriginal communities and making sure that's kind of in our programs. It's something probably DCJ hasn't invested a lot in the past, so we've really put quite a bit of effort in the last year or two into doing more in that space. I think looking at what we can do more in terms of Indigenous data sovereignty and governance in our early intervention programs is the other critical thing. Again, we haven't done a lot in that space, but we are partnering with an ACO in northern New South Wales at the moment who's undertaking an initiative with the Aboriginal community in which they work, undertaking an Indigenous data sovereignty project, and I think wherever we can support those initiatives where they are emerging from Aboriginal communities and together with ACOs, that will hopefully make a difference. And lastly, I think making sure that we're embedding the principles of the Aboriginal case management policy in our early intervention programs is also critical. We've recently done an evidence review around cultural wellbeing and safety, around frameworks that have been demonstrated to ensure that is happening across mainstream organisations. And one of the things we want to do in the rollout of the Aboriginal case management policy in the early intervention sector is link that cultural and wellbeing safety evidence to contracts with mainstream organisations to make ensure organisations are doing much better in that space and are held a bit more accountable to delivering on that. And in saying that, we do have some really good examples, particularly in our regional and rural New South Wales, of mainstream organisations, authentically partnering with communities, and I think that also shows some promise.
about in the family preservation space? So I know Anthony's talked about a number of overarching things as well as specific in TEI, but what's going on in family pres, Stephen?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, look, I think family preservation is obviously really critical to addressing the overrepresentation of Aboriginal kids in out-of-home care. I mean, we all know the statistics, like Aboriginals, less than 4% of the population of the state, but almost half of the out-of-home care population. And there are various commitments under Closing the Gap to reduce that quite significantly. We've heard before about the importance of early intervention and how important it is to address these things at the front end rather than at the tail end when it gets to crisis. And we don't say that because it's cheaper to do it at the front end, although it is. We say that because the best way to keep kids safe is to support the families and to keep them with their families, and also because it's the right thing to do. In terms of family preservation, so we've got currently 9 family preservation programs totaling around about $160 million a year. And we're in the process of going through a kind of recommissioning cycle with that. So those contracts, existing contracts, are going to be extended until the middle of 2025. So we have between now and then to use that time to really evaluate what we've been doing so far, what's been working, what hasn't been working, and looking at it in particular through an Aboriginal cultural lens, so we make sure that that's sort of applied to all that we do. In terms of what we're doing currently in that recommissioning process that's specific to Aboriginal kids, we've been talking to Aboriginal communities, practitioners, research bodies and peak bodies, including AbSec, to get their views on these things. And we've been looking at the evidence from what we've been doing so far. So we've been partnering with FACSIAR, which is within DCJ, to look at evaluating the existing services. To give an example, and some of those already have Aboriginal specific components. To give an example, the Naboo program, which is delivered by Waminda, is a good thing that we're looking at, and we are looking at engaging a sort of culturally qualified researcher who can really do a kind of deep dive into how that's been working with outcomes and measures that make sense to Aboriginal people as well in that cultural context. We know that some of the programs we run in family preservation have, to be really frank, have been basically cut and paste from other areas, like particularly the US. And for some families that works quite well, and for some, like including Aboriginal kids, we've heard that that isn't actually a good fit. So we are looking at that and what we need to do on that front. Anthony mentioned the shift towards Aboriginal community-controlled organisations. That's also the case in family preservation, particularly with the Permanency Support Program. And we know that Aboriginal-led community-controlled organisations is the best way to deliver some of those things, but it's not just a matter of sort of passing the funding over to them and saying, here's the money, go and do a really good job. We need to build the capability and capacity of those organisations to do that. We need to support them, we need to train them, and this takes time and resources as well. In terms of one other thing we're doing in particular is we're partnering with AbSec to create a sort of Aboriginal preservation, family preservation framework, which will help inform all that recommissioning work. So that could turn out to be a kind of just inform the recommissioning, or it could be its own sort of stream within the new kind of model. At the moment, as I mentioned, we've got 9 different family preservation programs. They've all sort of developed at different times and have different criteria. We are looking at kind of consolidating that a bit. Really, it's still a work in progress, but we're looking towards maintaining some key core components, such as like case management, with some sort of bolt-on sort of activities like family-led decision-making that we can use to sort of respond to the individual circumstances of each family in a more flexible way. And this will ensure that that's more responsive from a cultural lens. I think finally I might mention that because the recommissioning is now up at the middle of 2025, that also aligns with the recommissioning of the targeted early intervention work. So we're looking at that and the kind of synergies we can get with those 2 programs, because although they're different programs, they're servicing a lot of the time the same cohort and making sure there's kind of continuity of service between those different areas.
Thanks, Stephen. It's a good point that families don't really care which program they're in. They actually want their needs met and their children supported. So, putting those things on a time frame, on a shared time frame, obviously sounds like a sensible thing. So, John, in that context, I know you've been head in out-of-home care for the last couple of days, but I know that you have great aspirations for AbSec and the Aboriginal community-controlled sector in New South Wales around early intervention, prevention and family pres. Really interested to understand your aspirations, the things that are worrying you, and the opportunities ahead for all of us in how we can work together in this redesign, development and implementation.
Yes, that so easily said, hey, when we talk about it, it's epic, and I acknowledge that we're on a short time frame, so I won't digress too much. But to give you an indication that our aspirations are for all Aboriginal children that are being impacted by a child protection system, or at the earliest point have families that are being faced with issues or challenges, are supported by a strong Aboriginal child protection system, and not child protection, but an Aboriginal wellbeing system and sector that acknowledges the strengths of the Aboriginal families at the most earliest point and invests in them, supports them all the way through to prevent them coming into a child protection system that we and everyone knows is broken and has continued to perpetuate the overrepresentation of Aboriginal children in this sector. The aspiration is to unpack that a bit. What does that look like? It means that we need to have targeted investments in Aboriginal communities, not just organisations, communities made up of humans, people, families, children. Sometimes we have to nut that out for people to remind ourselves that this is beyond just our agencies, our peak body, our own visions, but really the essence of what is the cornerstone of Aboriginal culture, which is our people. Fundamentally, that's what drives us. Fundamentally, that's why the aspiration for procurement to be strategically directed to those community organisations to do that in the first instance. But beyond that is to see strong Aboriginal families, that are resistant to what we see as societal problems, social sector issues, the challenges of poverty, the challenges of housing, many of the things that you all know to be true. But for some reason, it continues to impact the most vulnerable communities of our communities. Aboriginal people, the first peoples of this country, still seem to be left behind. And I think a lot of the efforts that we have all collectively been pushing for quite some time are coming to a head, where we all collectively are saying enough is enough. We are at a point of change in this country, in the history of this country, and there is an opportunity for us to lean in. And I think through these conversations, through these aspirations and the support of a sector and the Minister, I also want to acknowledge you and your leadership. That support is critical for turning around 250 years of colonisation and the impact of that. I want to call that out very clearly, and to call it what it is. We're not challenged. We're not being. It's not some elephant in the room. Let's call it out. Let's call out racism. Let's call out poverty. Let's call out systemic racism. We need to be able to understand what those things are and why we are striving to make the change that we're calling for.
Thanks so much, John. And that really brings us, John and Susan have been talking a lot in this work about the role of non-Aboriginal community-controlled organisations, if you want to call them that, in this whole momentum towards change that, as you said, John, the sector is getting behind. And so I know that you two have been in conversation, which is, what we all need to hear, right? So, Susan, what do you think is the work that the broad early intervention, family support, family preservation sector needs to do? How do we, all work together to lift our competence, capability and responsiveness so that we get, alongside John, better outcomes for Aboriginal children? Not just better outcomes, great outcomes for Aboriginal children and families.
Thanks very much. And very true, John and I have been talking for 18 months now about how we can work better together. And the key thing, I think, for our sector, if I'm going to call it the mainstream sector, is the uncertainty. That is the thing that causes the most concern. And today we've heard about 30% and moving, but we're also hearing about the fact that there's no new money. So I want to say that philosophically, we all agree that we need to make a change. The concerns are around survival of organisations if funding is transferred out of their organisation to an ACCO. For some organisations, they're so small that losing a component of it means that whole organisation will close. And it's bringing ourselves back to it's about the children, but there's also, I've been in that position when contracts have changed. As a CEO, you are responsible for people's lives with their mortgages and looking after their children. So it's a concern, and it's very hard to answer it, I understand, from DCJ and from the Minister's point of view, but it's a reality that John and I have spoken about. In terms of the recommissioning, we're talking again in that transfer, there isn't any new money. So who will provide that cultural safety if our organisations or our mainstream organisations actually do lose their Aboriginal colleagues if they do go to an ACCO and that transfer happens? There's about how do we maintain that safety? And I know there's programs that are going to be available, but I know from the conversations I had that having Aboriginal colleagues in an organisation makes an organisation a better organisation as a mainstream organisation. I've also had conversations with John about wanting to know, how do you make that first step if you are going to reach out to an ACCO? And John has said to me, reach out and build relationships. That's the most important thing to do. And Kate talked about that earlier. First and foremost, don't go running down the road with your MOU. I've got a key component that I've got to work with Aboriginal organisation. Quick, let's get together. Which is what as mainstream organisations we do. We ring up someone and say, I've got to write a contract, I've got to have a partner. It gives me another point on the spreadsheet. Can we sign something? And we sign each other's MOUs to make that happen. That is not the way to go forward. John has made that very clear with me. But someone I would like to really acknowledge who is in the room today is a dear colleague, Michelle Rogers. She is a true inspiration to me. She's put me in my place a couple of times, but she's also been a massive support. I can't see you, Michelle, but I know you're out there. She explained to me very clearly how to work with Aboriginal communities, and I've written it down because I don't want to get it wrong. She said, think of it like a car journey. Sometimes we might ask you to drive. More likely, we're going to ask you to ride shotgun. Maybe to offer some support, and we'll go on the journey together. You will often be asked to sit in the back, and as John said to me, not to be a backseat driver. Sometimes you'll be invited to not to be in the car at all, doors locked. My response to Michelle, it was a light bulb moment for me, was, I think too many of us are running ahead, trying to get in the driver's seat, shouting, it's okay, I'll drive, I'll get us there. We need to stop, reflect, and listen, and learn. What we need to ask is, what is my place here? Where would you like me to sit on this journey? Thank you.
Wow, Susan, I think I'm just wondering who's holding the Hail Mary thing in the car as it goes around the corner. A beautiful way to think about that, and that kind of takes us back really to Anna Muriel around, SNAICC having this conversation with communities all over the country this year and over the last couple of years about how self-determination and the change we need to see in the way systems are designed and delivered can work. I'm wondering if you could, for all our colleagues here, share the sorts of messages you've heard from the sector, the things that we need as a sector to hear and respond to.
Well, it's really hard. I think voice is probably the thing, having as much voice in every room. And I mean, obviously, yes, campaigners. But in this sector, and like even talking today, like we need to be in the room when you're designing legislation. We need to be in the room when you're designing policy, when you're looking at programming and practice and budget and all of that. And have a consciousness that Aboriginal people have a role in all those forums, and I think that's really critical. And I think just hearing us of the direction of government, but Aboriginal people are really tired of people doing for us, do with us, listen to us. I think some of the remoter areas, and I think the poverty is the driving issue. And so do we have a system that actually provides brokerage or the best resources, or are we investing in ourselves and constantly putting more money? So sometimes instead of giving it as an extra position, give us capacity to have a bucket of money to be flexible. And so things that we're seeing really lots of success, like targeted care packages, putting into families to be able to support them to keep children in the families rather than constantly taking away. And I think that we can be flexible. I think we just constantly think that it's resources or putting people on seats. Sometimes they don't want a person on a seat, they want resources. I think people have said that, and it works for me, I sit on the Justice Forum, on the Education Forum, on the Health Forum, Family Violence Forum, and so voice in all those rooms that impact on child protection. So, Minister, the connection between all of those, we've seen, and you heard about the emotional abuse and how many children come into care. It's a no-brainer, family violence, but no connecting it up. And so in Victoria, we've moved from a 500, in 2018, VACA was funded for 500,000 for family violence. Now we're 15 million. And so you can see investment in Aboriginal community control to address the issue of family violence. And so better connecting, and where we look at early help and early intervention, we constantly see it as young mums, but we don't see adolescents and young people that are leaving our care that we're putting out into the juvenile justice. And so how do we actually start to look at Aboriginal people being able to inform all those areas? And I think the massive disconnect, but you know, particularly just having voices now, you have no idea from my point of view being on SNAICC and just seeing the difference, close the gap, that people talking to us, we're in the room with ministers now, with bureaucrats. This is something we've never seen before, and having voice at the highest level, and basically SNAICC and the intellect that they bring to the table, and to be able to challenge people like John, being able to talk not just to, you know, the minister for this state, but for the areas that are growing, like Western Australia's a long way behind. South Australia's getting there, Northern Territory, really, really challenging. I've often said to people, imagine, I'd love it in Victoria to tip Australia upside down, because what's been taken away in Victoria is a lot of our culture and ceremonies. And so if you want to visit real Aboriginal people, you go to the Northern Territory or parts of Western Australia. But the massacres and the impact of colonisation has so impacted in Victoria. So a lot of my work is really about giving culture back to children, and some of it, that's New South Wales as well, and to address terrible racism and discrimination that exists, and making children feel culturally safe in every environment, but also making our system culturally safe. And so making sure that, and that's what ACCOs bring to the table. They make children feel safe to identify as Aboriginal, to be Aboriginal. Many of our carers or children don't even know about what it is. They know I'm an Aboriginal person, but I'm not the full book. I don't know my nation, I don't know my language, I don't know. And so Victoria and New South Wales are on a similar, we've been traumatised through past removal, and we've got to do think things differently. We have to do a lot more work to reinstate Aboriginal culture into our families, into our carers, not just the children. But I think if we're churning out children that are living in a Western way of living and not strong Aboriginal children, then we don't build them up for a resilience future. We actually are creating children that are going to end up in juvenile justice, in criminal justice, and be cycling back in mental health and suicide. So to me, culture and doing more work around culture is our business, and we need to do that. We don't want to emulate child protection, but we do want to understand that protecting children is giving them a strong cultural base for who they are. For me, when John walks up to me, he asks me, who's my mob, where are you from, and we can connect. For a child to not know who they are and where they're from, it's a tragedy, it's a travesty. And John knows, and I know, I'm Aboriginal, I'm supposed to know everything about Mabo, WIC, treaty, everything. I'm the full book on Aboriginal, and there was a negative story on TV last night, did you hear that story, and do you know yeah, I know everything about Aboriginal. So, I mean, You
We're
know,
lucky to have you.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your service. So, you know, really today we've heard about there is a conversation that this sector needs to have. John and Susan are having it. Now it's for you to have it. Anthony and Stephen are having it at a different level too. And what we're really hearing is that voice. It's a word that's being used a lot in this country this year, but it means a lot. It's not just about being present. It's about having a voice, culture, connection, and that deep listening and willingness to know that change needs to happen and that you have an opportunity to be part of it. Thank you so much to our panel. Thank you all. We're heading off to morning tea now, and we could keep this conversation going forever, actually, but you can keep it going over morning tea. It's served just outside on the first floor area. Please be back in the room ready to go by about 11:25 for our next section, which will be a fantastic panel on doing meaningful evaluation work. Can't wait to see you.